Well, welcome everybody to the first ever Lunch and Learned Live, a Commuting with Kevin series. I'm super excited to be here. I just realized that my LinkedIn page, my professional personal page, is working just fine and it alerted everybody, but my Commuting with Kevin page doesn't have access to LinkedIn Live. So if that's the biggest problem I have today, it's going to be all right. So I did share the link from my personal page on there. So I'm super excited to introduce our guest here, and all the way from San Diego, California, beautiful San Diego, I'm sure, is former Pro Bowl center, San Diego Charger, Purdue Boilermaker, and the host of the Finding Center podcast, Nick Hardwick.
Kevin,
Hey,
how
Nick.
are you? Thank you for having me on.
Not a problem. I'm really excited. I didn't test it like this, so the fact that I can hear you when your mouth moves, it's not a kung fu movie, so that's exciting. So I know you and I kind of went back and forth through email in terms of what the show is going to look like and those types of things, and I sort of want to walk through your background and some of the things that you've learned along the way, and I kind of want to start at the beginning. And I've read a lot and seen a lot. Obviously, being from Indianapolis, Lawrence North High School, correct?
Yes.
You're born and raised Indiana, right?
I am, exactly. I grew up on the south side of town, and then before my 8th grade year, we moved to the north side of the city. So people that are in the Indianapolis area, you know the difference between north siders and south siders. So it was a big move.
That's right.
You might as well move from the southern states to the northern states doing that.
Exactly. And then once you got to Lawrence North, you were a wrestler. Did you play football at all in high school?
I played football my freshman year.
Okay.
However, we were a 2 middle school feeding into a high school system, and the other school had a really good middle school football program. Mine, not so much. We didn't.
Okay.
We had a really poor middle school football system, and we got the invite about a week and a half to 2 weeks later than everybody else. By the time my middle school showed up to freshman football, the captains were picked, the positions were basically set. And I honestly don't know if I black this out from my memory because it wasn't a great experience for me. I don't know if I ever stepped foot on the field as a freshman in high school.
Really?
I was 5'4", 125 pounds. I was a little runt, but I love football and I love to mix it up, and I never really got my chance. So for me, that's kind of a blank spot in my memory. I must have locked that key away and thrown it out somewhere. I can't really remember. After my freshman year, I stopped playing football, but I wrestled and I played baseball my freshman year.
That was going to be my next question. I was going to ask about baseball, any other sports that you were playing. How did football sort of roll you into wrestling? You said you like to mix it up a little bit.
It did, and my brother was a wrestler, and we had kind of dabbled in wrestling through our middle school years a little bit, hadn't gotten really heavy into it. But Lawrence North High School is really noted for two things. It's noted for high school basketball state championships and wrestling state championships, and producing a lot of state champion wrestlers. Being 5'4", 125 pounds, like a logical place for a physical natured boy to go would be to the wrestling room. And there's a Hall of Fame wrestling coach who was there with an incredible staff of a bunch of old high school wrestling state champions. His name is Royce Deckard. He was kind of at a really important time in my life. Royce took over for where my dad, not that my dad left off, but as a little lion cub kind of growing into an adolescent and starting to hit puberty and pushing back and not being willing to listen to my dad, Royce became that father figure that took over when I was unwilling to hear my dad's messaging any longer. And it's so critical to have that coach step in at that time and really just transform me.
So my 14-year-old is going through that right now, and we're like begging the coach. He wrestles, and we're like begging the coach, like, he's not listening to us anymore. So you talk to him. So hearing that from you is huge. So I love
that's what coaches are for.
Yeah.
And they know that. You're the high school wrestling coach. He understands that, and that's what he's there for. He's there to turn him into. You brought him up to adolescence. The coach now is to bring him into manhood.
Very cool. And now I had read that, did you lose like some 46 pounds to wrestle at some point?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
I went from 218 in the off season, my senior year, it was, I guess, working after my junior year of wrestling. I wrestled 171. I started getting bigger and bigger as puberty kind of took hold. And I worked my way up to 218 in the off season for Freestyle Junior Nationals, which happened in July in Fargo, North Dakota. I actually cut down to 191.5.
Wow.
And I stayed there, and I continued to chip away until like Thanksgiving, where I got down to my weight, which was 171.
Okay. And then were you to cut that weight? Was that something that you sort of learned on your own? Was there somebody helping you?
No help. This was high school hillbilly stuff, man. This was me cutting calories and waking up early and running miles, and essentially it was like a controlled starvation type diet.
Got it.
And back in the day, you got to remember in the 90s, like the Atkins diet was the thing.
Yes.
Right. So I was kind of Atkins-ish and pushing myself through all that. And it was grueling. I mean, I probably started in May cutting weight, and then finally made weight by end of November.
That's crazy.
To be able to do it, and then to sustain that all the way through the end of February, it was brutal.
Yeah, my son had to cut like 8 pounds a couple of months ago, and I thought it was insane. I'm like, what? And so when I read about this, I was like, all right, well, maybe it's not so crazy.
8 pounds, that's a day.
Yeah, I know. That's nothing.
Yeah.
But
I will say the weight cutting itself and being disciplined and that sacrifice. And I mean, I can remember so many nights like laying in bed in a sleeping bag with a sauna suit on.
Yep.
And sitting there, and my mouth just incredibly dry and basically starving.
That's crazy.
That kind of mental anguish that you're going through at the time ultimately, I think, made me a much tougher, much more willing to suffer type guy, which I'm really thankful for having chosen really to cut all that weight.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned a brother. Do you have other siblings?
I have a brother who's 15 months older than me, and I have a sister who is 18 years older than me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And she just had her birthday yesterday.
Very cool. Happy birthday to her.
Happy birthday, Debbie. Yeah.
I doubt she's watching my show, but it's possible. Yeah. And then when you were growing up, what did your parents do, like career-wise?
Yeah, they both worked at Indianapolis Power and Light, IPL.
Okay.
And my mom was kind of the equal employment opportunity officer, and my dad was a safety training coordinator.
Okay. And I ask that because sort of the follow-up question is, and I know more to the rest of the story, but where did you get this tenacity, this ability to say, hey, I'm going to lose 40 pounds and sleep in a sleeping bag? And where did that come from for you?
I think you're born with it.
Okay.
As I'm watching my own kids grow up, I think there's certain elements that you can give your children, and there's certain coping mechanisms that we can kind of build into them, and there's stories that we can tell and heroes that we can give. And I don't know, maybe I just gravitated early on to certain heroes that I guess I've always been physically inclined. So people who could go through a lot of physical adversity and people who could suffer physically and then come out on top. But I think in a sense, like in a way, you're born with it. You've always got the heart and the soul, and it's just a matter of finding the outlet to show that. And I think for me, athletics was always that thing that allowed me to show my heart and to show my tenacity and the discipline.
Very cool. Now, did you win an Indiana State championship your senior year?
No, I got second.
Second. Okay. Well, we need to update your Wikipedia page.
Somebody said I won a state champion.
Yeah. I mean, we can leave it. That's fine.
I would take the state championship. But no, I didn't, and I'm really thankful that I didn't win.
Okay.
There's something about not almost achieving what you want to achieve.
Yep.
And then falling just short and being a little bit heartbroken, and then going on and striving even harder to
hunger.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. I'm with you.
That's exactly what it is.
So you graduated, and did you look at other colleges? I guess what was the plan there?
The plan was, and this is funny, like I didn't have a great plan in life, like other than wrestling and losing weight and beating the opponent that was up and coming. And my parents, I think, just inherently trusted that I knew kind of what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. Like
Okay.
going 2 weeks before the SAT my junior year, my friends were like, hey, they were talking about their SAT scores. And I was like, wait, when do I take the SAT? And they're like, you better sign up. This is the last one you can take if you want to get into college. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'll sign up for that.
Yeah.
And then just applying to college, like I didn't know really anything about the entire process. So I applied to schools that I probably had zero business applying to, not being an athlete going to those schools.
Sure.
I applied to Northwestern, I applied to Penn State, I applied to like UNC, and they all came back, of course, no.
Yeah.
I applied to Purdue, but I didn't just like apply to Purdue and do general studies. I applied to like, and this is like how naive I was. And this is like kind of partly my mindset is like, just dream big. It's like astronautical engineering. It's like, I just thought it looked cool on the sheet.
Hey, Neil Armstrong.
That was the box that I checked, right? I was like, that looks cool. And then they denied me. And I was like, oh, man. So I had to reapply. And I applied for general studies. And they allowed me into the general studies department, which was, I'm really thankful. But I had a offer. I had been accepted to go to Rutgers to wrestle, which was the State College of New Jersey. But I'd never been to New Jersey. I don't know why it even struck me to go there, like why I reached out to the wrestling coach. I don't really know, but my best friend went to Purdue, so I ended up following my best friend up to Purdue and
got it.
I had a great experience there, and obviously things worked out really well.
So your freshman year would have been 2000, so the Rose Bowl year.
My freshman year was 1999. 2000 was, it was the Rose Bowl year.
Okay. And you
second year.
But you were not on the team at that point, correct?
No, I was just a fan in the stands.
Got it.
Jangling my keys on the kickoff like everybody else was.
You were probably 20 rows behind me. That was my senior year. So,
so you had moved down.
Yes, and that was back when we used to throw cups after touchdowns, and there'd be cups flying everywhere. So,
fun?
And then, so I've heard you say that your best friend asked you to walk on with him. I've read that you were sort of inspired by Drew Brees and the Rose Bowl run. Which one?
I was inspired by Drew Brees, and as were a lot of other young men at Purdue at the time who tried to walk on at the same time that I walked on. It came from my friend Frank Avino, who's up in Chicago now, and he was part of the Naval ROTC program that I was a part of. I was actually on a Marine Corps scholarship at Purdue.
Okay.
And me, Frank Avino, and David Moore, who was a Marine Corps ROTC midshipman at the time as well, we all decided we were going to attempt to do this together. So we trained for several months. Frankie, I guess, found an ad in the classifieds of the Purdue Exponent. And he came to us and he called and he did all the work and he's like, okay, the tryouts are going to be this date, this time. And so Frankie gave us the information and David and I put together the training program and we asked our major who was in charge of our physical training with the Marine Corps, he said, okay, we're going to try to walk onto the football team. Can we have permission not to show up to physical training for the ROTC program? And he said, absolutely, boys. So every morning we were either at the Mackey Indoor, or what was it, Lambert?
Yep.
Lambert, the indoor track, or at the co-rec lifting weights.
Wow.
And trying to get ready for what we thought was going to be the little Purdue walk-on combine. And
sure.
We prepared ourselves fairly well.
Yeah, and I think that most people would probably look at, a walk-on scenario like Rudy, and obviously you're much, much bigger than he is, but from a what was that like scenario, I mean, just getting the crap beat out of you, man, what was that scenario like for you?
Oh my God. Hey, it's so funny. I just watched Rudy with my boys recently, and it brought back tons of memories. And for a while, I was so jaded on the whole Rudy story because I was kind of playing Rudy a little bit, especially when I first walked on. So I walked on, they put me immediately in 6 a.m. workouts, which is like a brutal physical challenge for 6 weeks, 6 a.m. you're up. I ended up developing an ulcer because it was just so brutally hard and coaches are yelling and I had terrible anxiety and wasn't sleeping. And made it through that, but they had put me with the linebacker group because they wanted to balance the numbers out. And when I walked on, I was 230 pounds. So I was
Okay.
kind of the size of those guys, but I wasn't the speed of those guys. It was
Right.
Landon Johnson, Gilbert Gardner, Nico Kudavides,
Yep.
guys who all ended up going on and getting drafted in like the 3rd and 4th round of the draft when I got drafted in 04. So I'm trying to keep up with these guys. So I'm working at an incredibly high rate, and they're just able to handle the work so much easier. But when I walked on, they put me with the linebackers, but then Brock Spack, who was the D coordinator at the time, he came to me on the very first day of spring ball when I actually made it through the 6 a.m.s. And he said, "Who told you were a linebacker?" And I said, "No, nobody did, but I was working out with them at 6 a.m.s. He goes, "Okay, come with me." And he took me by the arm and he walked me down and we walked past the defensive end room. And then we walked to the defensive tackle room at 230 pounds. And he goes, "Here's your new friends. This is your meeting room." So
oh my gosh.
Yeah, with Matt
and these guys are like 280,
Carroll.
290. Yeah.
Oh, they were just animals. And I walked in there at 230 pounds, sat down, and basically my whole process that I did was I stood at the back of every single line. I watched 10 or 12 guys go through a drill, and then I imitated them the best that I could at 230 pounds. But I got the tar beat out of me. I was 230. I went through spring ball, and over a 4-month period, I ended up putting on 45 pounds. I got up to about 275.
I was going to ask you about that. I know what you did, but if you can tell the story in terms of the 2 pounds of ground beef and setting an alarm and all that stuff, talk to me about that.
It was brutal. So I asked Matt Mitrione, because he's like, "You're a really small dude in here." I was like, "Well, how do I gain weight? What do I have to do?" And he's like, "Here's what I did: 2 Jimmy John gargantuan subs a day." So I took that. I did the 2 Jimmy John gargantuans, which I still don't know if I could eat Jimmy John's after that. So I would do. I mean, you think about the amount of processed meat on that. It's it's just disgusting to think about. So I'd have 2 of those a day, and then my roommates would cook me 2 pounds of ground beef a day and throw just various toppings on there. So my caloric intake, and then I would make EAS Myoplex was a really big protein shake at the time. I would make one of those before I went to bed in a blender, and I would sit it on my nightstand, and I would set the alarm for 2 or 3 in the morning, and I wake up at 2 or 3, chug my protein shake, go back to bed, and have an easy 700 calories in the middle of the night. And you can gain weight fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Eating like an absolute behemoth. So I put on 45 pounds, which helped go against Gene Murchkowski, Rob Turner, Kelly Butler. Those guys were just killing me. But I really did feel like, especially playing D-line and getting the tar beat out of me and being way smaller than everybody else, I really did for a long time feel like Rudy Rudiger.
So how did the switch to offensive line happen?
So coming into, it would have been my 4th year. So I don't like to say junior, senior anymore, because now I'm like on football schedule. Coming into my 4th year, I was working into the actual depth chart at defensive tackle. So I was going to be either the number 2, Craig Terrell was number 1. And then I was going to be either number 2 or number 3, depending on if I could beat anybody out. A really good spring. I was super excited about my progress. I'd gotten bigger and gotten really strong. And the first night of training camp, they came to me. Jim Chaney came to me and he goes, "Hey, I want to see you in the office." He's like, "We're going to move you to guard." And I was like, "Oh my God, no, I'm about to play." Like, all I wanted to do when I walked onto the football team was either cover kicks, be on the kickoff return team.
I just want to hit somebody.
I wanted to hit somebody, and I really, more than anything, wanted a better view, wanted to wear the cool jersey and be a part of the team and not be cheering for the guys on the field, but be the one that I thought people were cheering for. At least I could make that up in my head if I was standing on the sideline. I just wanted a better seat. And I was getting ready to maybe start or at least see significant playing time, and they moved me over. And Coach Gary Emanuel, who's now been a really good defensive line coach in the National Football League for a long time, he came to me and knocked on the door. He had bed checks that night. And he's like, "Nick, I understand they moved you over." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty bummed out about it." I was like, I thought I was going to get a lot of playing time, and now I got to start over and learn a new position. He goes, No, Nick. He's like, "You would have been an average defensive lineman. you're going to be a great offensive lineman.
Wow.
Like, I see a lot of potential in this. And I went to bed that night and I was like, he said, I'm going to be a great offensive lineman. And they moved me right into, not kidding, day one, starting left guard.
That's crazy. What's going through your head at this point? I mean,
I didn't know anything. I mean, I barely knew football. I barely knew the plays on defense that I was supposed to be running. And now they're moving me to offensive line. I told Jim Chaney, I said, Coach, I don't know left from right. I don't know any calls. I don't know a pass. I don't know a run. I don't even know how to get into a left guard stance. I don't know what it looks like. And he goes, oh, Nick, you'll be fine. He's like, you got Gene and you got Pete Lockheed next to you. They'll tell you everything to do. And sure enough, they did. And the very first, and this is how I knew I was onto something, my very first rep of one-on-one pass protection, which is like one of the hardest things to do as an offensive lineman.
Yep.
I stoned the guy at the line of scrimmage and everybody went crazy. And I was like, holy crap, I think I'm going to be good at this.
Literally my next question is, when did the light come on for you? So
yeah, right then. It just felt like I was wrestling somebody. And I was good. I was a really good wrestler. And I just had a bigger body and I kind of knew how to use leverage and my strength and hands and hold my ground and do all that. And so the light bulb clicked. I played that year at guard. I had to fight through a high ankle sprain, and that was really difficult because I didn't really understand at the time what a high ankle sprain was and how severe it was. I was like, it doesn't make sense that I can't play. You said my ankle sprained.
Yeah.
I was like, so there was like a number of weeks that I didn't play. And then Gene Merchkowski actually got hurt going against Indiana, the last regular season game in the old Oak and Bucket game. That was
in the torrential downpour in Bloomington.
No, that was 2 years before, but I remember that game very vividly.
Well, it was awful. Yes. I was there.
That was the year before. Yeah. That was awful. I remember, now that you bring that up, I haven't thought about that game in forever.
It was the Antoine Randall monsoon. Yeah.
Antoine Randall was a monsoon. That guy was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
So Gene tore his ACL, and then Jim Chaney moved me immediately to center for bowl prep, and we were going to the Wells Fargo Sun Bowl to play University of Washington.
Yep.
And they had a guy, we remember, Tank Johnson, defensive lineman, got drafted by the Chicago Bears.
Yep.
And so coming into that, I barely knew any of the calls. And then into the bowl game, I was going to be the one making the calls. I had never snapped a ball in my life. So it was like 2 weeks of straight boot camp for me. I can't tell you how many pass protection reps I took, how many one-on-one reps that I took in the run game, just so I could be sure that I could snap it and block at the same time. So I knew during that little 2 week window leading up to the bowl game that I felt really good, and it felt even better than I did at guard. I just loved the spacing and the timing and being able to use a quick first step, and it felt even more like wrestling. And then when we played Washington, when we played the Huskies in the bowl game, I just felt so good. I felt like this is something here.
Yeah,
I can take this to the next level.
Was that the game that Gilbert Gardner returned a fumble for a touchdown?
See, you remember it better than I do.
Yeah, it was 34-14. So yeah, I do.
Good for you. That was better than Purdue against Washington in the Rose Bowl.
Correct. Yeah.
34-24. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I remember stuff that I'm not supposed to remember, but can't remember my phone number. So
I like that.
Yeah. So you played in 2 bowl games. So you've got that bowl game, and then the year after that was the Capital One Bowl, correct? In Orlando, and you played center the entire year that year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So
we lost to Georgia, I think it was double overtime there.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
I was there. That was rough.
You remember that one.
It was fun. I think Sean Phillips had the sack and strip and right at the end, and we went down and tied it up and then lost in overtime. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good times. So you finished that up. Do you immediately know at this point, hey, I'm going to get drafted? Like, this is the next step for me?
Yeah, and I knew only because I had an agent call me who became my agent. He called me kind of 3/4 of the way through the season, and he started talking about, hey, I'm talking to scouts that are bringing up your name a lot, and they're saying, here's kind of where you're going to be drafted. And I had no idea. I thought, wow, I'm pretty decent at this. I'm having a good year. I thought I was good compared to people that I was watching on film. And when he called, it verified that. And then they worked really hard to get me into the Senior Bowl. And then once I went to the Senior Bowl, I knew for sure I was going to get drafted. It was just kind of a matter of, how did I do that week? How did I do at the combine? And, it was just kind of a matter of placement from that point on.
What was the process like between the combine? And you hear a lot of guys that, hey, their senior year's over, or what have you, and they go out to California and they just train like crazy in these schools. Like, did you do something like that? How did you prepare?
I did, yeah. We went out to Phoenix. My agent sent us all out to Phoenix, and ours wasn't near as extensive then as it has become now with the facilities and how outrageous they are and the data that they have and all the metrics and everything. We were kind of more of an old school type approach to it. It's like you wanted to look good on stage, you wanted to perform well, but it was, based on like what the areas and the facilities look like now. Ours was more of a Rocky Spartan type training facility as opposed to, what Ivan Drago was training in Rocky IV.
Good reference. I like it.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
But it was fun. It was great. I mean, what a really nice experience overall, and really cool to go away and to be able to focus and to be with other guys who are doing the exact same thing. It was a really cool experience.
And then from a combine perspective, you hear the stories about, the Wonderlic and the interviews and all those crazy things. And Tom Brady's picture still gets passed around these days. It's hilarious. And when you were talking to teams, did you have a good feel for where it was possible that you were going to get drafted? Okay.
No idea. I had no idea. I was kind of projecting myself. The only team that I had a couple of private meetings, one with Jacksonville. One of their scouts really loved me. I had one after hours with the St. Louis Rams, and Mike Martz was the coach, and their offensive line coach really liked me. Other than that, I had zero idea. And the Chargers specifically were never on my radar.
Really?
They were the opponent coach at the Senior Bowl. And the only interview I ever had with them was kind of a roundtable discussion with their offensive line coach and the North team at the Senior Bowl. And that was it. And then apparently the Cincinnati Bengals, who coached us at the Senior Bowl, their offensive line coach really wanted me, but we had the 66th pick, the Chargers did, and the Bengals had the 76th pick.
Got it.
And so if I would have fallen 10 more spots, I probably would have ended up a Cincinnati Bengal.
So you're watching the draft. Were you at home? Did you host a party?
No, I was at home. It was just me, mom, and dad.
Oh, that's great. And did you get the whole story? The phone rang and it's somebody from the Chargers.
Yeah, it was. The phone rings, and on the other end, it's Nick, Marty Schottenheimer. Congratulations. You're a San Diego Charger. And I look up on the screen at my parents' house with the 65th pick of the 2004 NFL Draft. The San Diego Chargers select Nate Kading, kicker, Iowa. Like,
what?
I was like, I kind of looked at my phone, and
it's one of your buddies pranking you.
That's exactly what I thought, but I could tell it was an older voice, and he's like, I'm going to pass you on to AJ Smith, our general manager. And so he passed me on, and then I didn't realize, kind of being a little naive, that the Chargers also held the very next pick. But here's what really chaps my butt. If you have two back-to-back picks, you got 65 and you got 66, and you're going to draft a center and a kicker, do the center right and draft him before the kicker. What the hell?
Yeah, I can't argue with you there that much. But
and I think since that moment, I've had like a bone with kickers and specialists. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, I think everybody does. It's just what you're supposed to do.
It's expected.
So rookie year, the center that was starting as you coming in was holding out for a contract.
He was holding out. Yeah, he had performed really well as a free agent, undrafted free agent, came in. Jason Ball was his name. out of University of New Hampshire, and he was holding out for a contract, which he declared he was going to be holding out before the draft, which you're not. That's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like that, somebody gave him some bad advice to hold out before the draft because they held the final card there. And so they drafted me, and then it was still kind of presumed that if Jason came back in a reasonable time, at least this is the impression my offensive line coach gave me at the time, it was still kind of presumed that if he came back that he was going to be the starter. And so my coach was like, you still need to get comfortable playing either guard. We want to swing guard. And then after the very first preseason game, which was kind of cool for me, it was the Indianapolis Colts. It was the first one I ever played in. It was super cool. They came out to San Diego to play at Qualcomm Stadium, and I had a really good game. Like, I graded out incredibly well. My offensive line coach at that point in the meeting room the next day, he goes, this is the best that I've ever seen a rookie in his first game perform.
Wow.
In a preseason game. He's like, you still got a lot of work to do. but basically he was saying, you're our guy.
Wow.
And so they, at that point, didn't even really want Jason to come back. And he continued to hold out until like week 4, week 5, something like that.
And is this your dream scenario, or are you terrified at this point?
Oh, total dream.
Okay.
Yeah, I had no interest in ever being a backup.
Okay.
Like that, it never even crossed my mind that I was going to sit on the bench. Like it didn't even cross my mind. And again, kind of back to the general theme, it's like everything's going to work itself out. You just have a little naivete and go in and work hard and take care of opportunities, and you capitalize, and you don't think too much about everything. You just go and you do, and you perform and you work, and you keep your head down and you continue to work, and everything eventually works its way out.
Good things will come to you when that happens.
That's right.
Now, I had heard, I think during one of your podcasts, talking about maybe before games getting sick. Was that an anxiety thing? Like, what caused that?
Yeah, so I had told you I developed the ulcer in 6 a.m.s.
Yep.
And it was the defensive tackle coach at Purdue who I think kind of brought this whole reaction to me. His name's Mark Hagan.
Yep. And he's an IU guy.
He's an IU guy, and I think he's actually back at IU now.
He is.
He may be somewhere else. Super intense, like shaved head, and I thought he was pretty jacked for being a coach. Like, most coaches don't worry about themselves physically. Mark did. He was in there training all the time, and he always had this nasty vein down his forehead. And I'm telling you, almost every time he yelled my name, I threw up. He's like, Hardwick, you're in. I'm like, ugh. So I think he brought this like reaction about me that kind of became like my program. And I couldn't shake it for my entire career. Like, every game I would get so anxious and nervous before a game. And for a while it was like, am I going to survive? Is this giant that I'm blocking over here, is he going to be able to knock my head off my shoulders? Am I going to be able to withstand his most power? Because I was a little center, and I was, the beginning of my career especially, I'm going against guys like Ted Washington, who were 410 pounds.
Yep.
Sam Adams was a good 390, 400 pounds. There used to be giants that played nose guard. Vince Wilfork, 370 at least. I mean, his back was 4 feet wide. And so when I'm thinking about blocking these guys, and I'm like 285 pounds, I'm like, these dudes are going to pick me up and throw me into the quarterback if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And so at first it was kind of that. And then it became, once I realized I can handle the blocking, it kind of became not performance anxiety. It almost became anxiety about the amount of work that it was going to be. And how physically grueling it was going to be for the next 3.5 hours.
Yep.
I mean, it is digging trenches. It is manual labor, and it is really physically draining. And so every weekend, getting geared up for the amount of work that it was going to be, that was really the part that gave me the anxiety towards the end of my career. Is like, whew, you ready for this work? Are you ready to take that field through the tunnel, sprint out, and then I had to set the tone every single play for every game that I played. Was, you're standing on the sidelines waiting after a kickoff or waiting after a punt, and you sprint onto the field, and you don't stop working until you get back over to that bench. And not only that, it's like you have to have the right look on your face. You have to have the right demeanor.
Wow.
I mean, everything has to be right. So you're projecting the right image, not only to the opponent, but to your teammates of, hey, this is the attack mindset that we have to have.
Very cool. Well, I definitely want to get to the stuff after the Chargers, but I want to mention, I know in 06 you signed kind of your first big contract.
Yes.
What was that like for you? Kind of, you know, Indiana kid coming from Indianapolis. What was that like?
Oh, it was awesome. So I got the first offer that I got, I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, you won't believe it. It was after my second year. And I hadn't even finished my first contract out, or I haven't even really thought about finishing my first contract. And so I called Dad and said, Dad, you won't believe it. Here's what they offered me. And he's like, well, you're an idiot if you don't take it. And he's like, you realize the day you sign, you will have made more money than your mom and I combined working in 30 years.
Yeah, adding it all up.
Yes, he's like, if they don't offer you any more, you're still taking the deal. Like, yes, sir.
And then that's where your agent comes in to take care of all the other stuff.
Yes, and then he gets you more money. So it was just really awesome. I mean, the thing I remember about that, though, was it was only after my second year, and I walked into the weight room after I had signed the deal, and I was feeling really good about myself. And my strength coach, Dave Redding, who's the original strength coach in the National Football League.
Wow.
Yeah, hired to the Cleveland Browns under Marty Schottenheimer. And right when I walked in, Dave's first thing to me, he's like, don't let your ass get flat.
Oh,
meaning it's still time to squat. You got a lot of work to do, and you ain't there yet, kid. Yeah,
that's
and I
awesome.
thought that was a really powerful message. Don't let
you still had somebody said, hey, don't let your head get too big.
Exactly right. Yeah,
which
was a great moment and a great job by him, which pays off to have somebody really experienced in that position.
You were snapping footballs to Drew for a couple of seasons, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And then obviously they brought in Phil Rivers, and that was the majority of your career was snapping footballs to Philip Rivers.
That's right. 2 years to Drew and then 9 years to Philip Rivers. And a couple of games, actually, super highlight of my career was snapping a couple of games to Doug Flutie.
I was going to guess that, and I didn't want to be wrong. So I remember that. That's awesome. So in September of 2014, you have a neck injury, and they place you on IR. At that point, you know that your career is coming to an end. Yeah.
So before that year, anyway, it was the last year of my contract, 11th season. That same strength coach at one point had given me the advice. He said, don't stick around too long. You don't want to stick around too long. And I wanted to get out after 8. That was my initial plan coming into the league. And after I'd signed my second contract, I guess, get out after 8. And then the money that they threw at me, and I still felt really good, and I still felt young. I couldn't turn it down. So 3 more seasons, but that was going to be it. I wasn't going to, even if I could, I wouldn't have continued to play. But I moved on. After it was week 1, Monday Night Football, I got a huge stinger blocking Calais Campbell. And I had so many stingers over the course of my career. I'm talking hundreds of stingers that I had received. And what was happening, unique to this stinger situation that I kind of developed during training camp, was my hands were like lobster clawing. So these fingers, my pinky and my ring finger, were all sticking together, and I was having a hard time with water bottle lids or buttoning my shirt up or holding a pencil. I could still snap a ball. I could still block dudes. But it started to get scary.
Yeah.
And our doctors started to get scared. Our medical staff started to get scared. And so they, thankfully, I'm really grateful for them at the time stepping in, intervening, and saying, you're done. Because I don't know really if I would have been able to do that without them going, no, you've had enough. Yeah. It's time for you to move along. And I'm really thankful that I had people who did that.
And during this time period, you know, maybe your last couple of years, did you feel like it was always going to be your goal when you finished up to immediately start losing the weight?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I had been told for years by our offensive line coach at the time, Hal Hunter, he's like, guys that retire go one of 2 ways. You either get bigger or you get smaller, and you never stay the same.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was obviously I'm not going to get bigger. And I had a really hard time maintaining my weight anyhow. So I was like, I can't wait to get smaller. And I knew what it was like to be a really slim guy. I mean, I wrestled at 171 pounds my junior and senior year. I felt like Spider-Man when I did that. I could run forever. I could climb a 30-foot rope with no feet attached. I mean, it was like American Ninja Warrior stuff. Yeah. So I knew what that felt like, and I knew what I felt like at my biggest, which was 308. And the difference between the two, I knew that I had to get closer to the Spider-Man feeling rather than the sumo wrestler Nick.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was immediately, once I got shut down, I started losing the weight immediately.
Yeah. And you on IR in September, and then your announcement for retirement was in February. So 5 months. And in that time period, had lost 85 pounds.
Almost 85 pounds. Yeah. Okay. I got down to my lowest to 202.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was after a yoga class, a hot yoga class. I think I lost like 6 pounds in class. And I remember getting on the scale in the locker room there, and it said 202. And I was like, 3 more pounds and this thing's going to say 199 and I'm going to be done. And then I turned and looked in the mirror at my profile, and I was so skinny, it scared myself.
That's crazy.
And I was like, if I go out in these streets and just say Armageddon hits, I'm going to get my butt kicked. I've got to start putting some weight on like now. And so I started going eating, started lifting heavier. And now I'm sitting at about 235 very comfortably.
Okay. And did you immediately start to see the health benefits from that? Better sleep, breathing better, those types of things?
Yes. And mostly what you immediately feel is your joints and the pressure taken off of your hips, your knees, and your ankles.
Okay.
So I had 2 ankle surgeries on my left. I had 2 Liz Frank surgeries on my right foot. I had 3 separate knee surgeries, and I subluxed my hip at one point. And so that all of it needed the weight taken off. And what I've been told is for every pound that you lose, it magnifies 3 to 4 times the effects that you feel on your lower extremity joints.
That's crazy.
And so we're talking about 240 plus pounds, or even 240 to 300, depending on how you multiply it.
Right.
Of reduced stress on those joints. I mean, it was tremendous. Yeah.
That's amazing. So when you announced your retirement, you also announced at that point sort of a new job, a new career that you were going to take on. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah. So I knew that 2 weeks afterwards, I was going to be a DJ on a local classic rock station, which was kind of my jam, 101.5 KGB out here in San Diego. It's been a landmark station forever. And so I was taking the 3 to 6 p.m. shift with a co-host, Clint August. And I was super excited because, you know, the thing you want to do is to be able to have something to shift your focus onto and have a career and have direction and purpose. And that went well for about 2 months.
Okay. And so I know what this is, but when I say it, you're going to know. So tell me the Nicaragua story. Like what, after 2 months, what happens?
So after 2 months, I had just found myself at a very low point in my life. And I think it was on a Saturday that I came inside crying to my wife, telling her something's not right. I don't feel good. I'm absolutely miserable. I'm going to get the hell out of here. And I'm going to leave you and the boys. The boys were really little at the time. I'm going to leave you and the boys with everything. You give me $1 million and I'm going to Nicaragua. I had never been to Nicaragua. I'd never known anybody who had been to Nicaragua. And I don't know why the hell Nicaragua came out of my mouth, but I was like, I think I was going to live in like a beach shack and just go straight caveman, kind of essentially on them. And I was super depressed. Really, really low point in my life. I don't want to say like I was suicidal, but I had reached really emotionally rock bottom, and to the point where I wanted to completely eject from life. Like I hadn't put a plan together. Like I wasn't saying I was planning killing myself or anything, but I wanted out of life. I wanted out of my body, and something wasn't right. And I called my boss and I called my co-host and I said, hey, I'm not coming in Monday, and I'm not coming in any day after that anytime soon. I've got to work on myself right now.
Yeah. And you talked about this a little bit on your podcast, and I think that there was some chemical imbalance, but do you think some of it was just kind of a depression from the physical activity of football and not being around the guys?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. It's not just so, like when I hear people talk about the effects of CTE, there's no doubt in my mind that that's real. I mean, just like my joints feel, I have to imagine there's a lot of arthritis built up in there, all along my spine, through my neck, I could show you my fingers, what they look like. I mean, yeah. So I know how my body feels from a joint standpoint, the kind of the rigors that it withstood. The brain's no different. So when I think about CTE, I think a lot of the times it's brain arthritis.
Yep.
Right. So CTE is real. There's no doubt about it. But there's other components that factor into, say, somebody taking their life. Are their finances straight? Is their relationship with their wife straight?
Right. There is some ownership to what you do in your life.
Yes. What kind of spiritual nature do you have about you?
Yep.
What kind of career? What kind of purpose? What are your values? So you've got this big pie, essentially, with all these little different pieces. If those pieces, the other pieces other than CTE, are very small, if your finances aren't straight, if your relationships aren't straight, if your spirituality is not straight, if your physical health is not straight, if you're not working out, if you're not eating a good diet, if you don't live a good lifestyle, well, then that CTE piece is a greater percentage of the overall pie. And I think a big part of what former players really need to be focused on is the parts that they can focus on, which is the other pieces of the pie, which if you make those percentages of the pie greater, well, then that piece of CTE doesn't quite have the effects that it could if it's a larger percentage of the pie.
Got it. I love that explanation. It makes perfect sense.
Right.
So you identify this, you and Jamie, your wife, go and see a doctor, I would assume, and say, hey, I don't feel good and things aren't right. And they do some tests, figure out various things that can help you.
Yes, exactly right. And this is a very common thing, specifically with football players and with special operators. And so this is it's low testosterone, low sex hormones, and it's a very common issue with traumatic brain injury.
Okay.
And I don't know the exact mechanisms how this works. I obviously understood that this was an issue with me after I had my blood checked. So she said, baby, we're going to go get you checked. We got to take you to a doctor. Obviously, wanted to run blood panels. I wanted to know if I was sick, wanted to know what's happening. It turns out that my testosterone levels were lower than my wife's at the time. And
your wife's a tough chick, so
she is tough, but goodness
still,
gracious, yeah, she was more of a man at that point than I was, and I actually had the testosterone of a 90-plus-year-old man, which is not good. And it turns out, so on my podcast, I talked to a Harvard public health doctor who runs the Morehouse College of Cardiology. He's an MD, and he's also part of the Harvard former football player study. Really common issue with former football players is low testosterone, and it's also really rampant in special operators because of the traumatic brain injury.
Yeah,
and
from
so
the gunfire, those types of
your brain is continually rattling around in there. In football, I mean, I've counted through all the practices, all the off seasons, all the games, all of spring ball, all of that, over 30,000 head hits, and I didn't even play high school football.
That's crazy.
And I only played 3 years of college ball. So we're talking about 30,000 plus head hits. You have to imagine some type of damage is taking place, and you see the effects of it.
And you're going to do like special treatments for brain waves and those types of things.
Yeah. So there's a place here in San Diego. One of my Navy SEAL buddies recommended this to me, and super happy about the recommendation. It was the Brain Treatment Center in San Diego. They use what's called magnetic E-resonance therapy. And so it's like transcranial electrical stimulation. If you've ever had E-stim done on you, which is like, muscle stimulation, it kind of feels like that, but for your brain.
Wow. That's amazing.
So what its job is, they do EEGs, which is like an EKG for your heart, but an EEG measures your brainwave activity. And so they could see a lot of disconnect from front to back and from side to side in my brain. And they can specifically go in and target areas of the brain that need support. And then they help realign the brain waves. And in my case, my brain waves needed to be sped up.
Oh, wow.
So there's a couple of different areas. We won't talk about the lower areas, but there is theta, alpha, and beta. Theta is like a meditative, almost going to sleep state. Alpha is kind of the area that you would like to be in. It's like a day-to-day operating, things are working very crisply. And then beta is like you're way too ramped up. Well, the special operators with a lot of PTSD guys have beta waves. They can't shut down. So their brain's always in a heightened state, which you could imagine is not a very good feeling.
No.
And then in my case, I was operating like I was meditating. And I'm not a Buddhist monk. And so the meditation throughout the entire day was probably not an ideal place, although it does have its time and place.
For sure.
And so they tried to, and they did a good job of, I felt the effects of it and I could see it through the subsequent EEGs, is realigning my neurons and then getting them to fire more in sync from front to back and from side to side.
That's amazing.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So since like 2015 or so, I've followed you on Instagram and sort of seen the progression of your health and wellness, goals and the things that you've done. And I know that you talk about in your podcast, sort of doing all the different diets, the paleos and primals and Whole30s, and
tried it all.
You've done it all, and almost as not a game, but something fun for you to try. Let's do this one and see what it does to me.
Yeah, it is a game. It's like experimenting with myself.
That's awesome. And I know that sort of the thing that you stuck to was this 4-2-3-1 diet. Are you still doing that?
Oh, no. That was initially to get the weight off. So I kind of devised this diet on my own, which after having talked to all these experts and thought leaders on my podcast, like, kids, don't try this at home. You don't want to do this at home. This is not recommended, but it did work for me.
That's pretty funny.
So the 4-2-3-1, basically I would break my meals up into 600 calorie meals. And one day I would have 4 600 calorie meals. The next day I would have 2 600 calorie meals, 1,200 calories. The next day I would have 3 600 calories. And the fourth day I would have 1 600 calorie meal, all while working out and walking and staying very active. And I'm telling you, having come from a 7,000 calorie diet, which I was on to maintain my weight in football, that weight fell off of me.
Yeah.
It was like I was losing 3 pounds a day.
It's training your body to not get used to anything. It's always not understanding what's going on and thus staying active.
That is exactly right.
Very cool. And I know that because of the neck injury and those types of things, you don't do a ton of like heavy lifting weight type stuff.
So I didn't initially, but I am now. So we own 3 gyms in town, and we partnered up with a guy who had started a gym. Jamie found this gym. Actually, she was like class pass everywhere. She would go take hip hop dance. She would go to this gym, try this gym out. She could never find her gym. And then one day I asked her where she went. She's like, "Oh, I found this place. I think I love it." I was like, "What's it called?" She's like, "Renegade Fit Camp." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." I was like, "Good. We'll see if you like it in 2 months." 2 months later, she's like getting stacked, like nice back, and 30 plus years old. I don't want to give her age. I don't know if she wants to.
Don't do that.
She doesn't care. Yeah. But like after having 2 kids, her body looked better than it ever had before. And she was a college soccer player at Purdue. And so I kept getting curious, and I was like, "What's going on over there?" And she's like, "Just come with me to a workout, would you?" I said, "Fine." One day I just set a date, and I went in, and it was just like I was back in the weight room at Purdue or with the Chargers. And it was like loud music. Weights were going around, great energy in the room. And I was like, this is my gym. Well, since then, we've helped them build 2 more locations, and we have leases out on 2 more. So it'll be 5 total gyms in San Diego
awesome.
in a 3-year period. And the programming's so good. And here's why I was really interested in becoming a part of it was weights to that point had really been hurting me. And the programming was so balanced and the teaching was so correct that I could lift weights pain-free. And
that's amazing.
It finally felt good to be back in the weight room, because that's kind of been my space since I was like 14 years old.
Very cool.
And that's like being a football player, that's where you play. Like that's recess for a football player. If football is work, the weight room is the play yard. And that's where we get to have a good time.
So I won't go into everything on your Instagram. I have it right there on the screen. So if anybody wants to go, and it's fun to follow your story just because you get ideas from different foods. Like I wouldn't think to put together a green smoothie and dump it on cereal, but you do.
It's good.
Yeah, I see that. And the various things, there are things on there that I see that I'm like, man, I'd really like to try that. And my wife says to me, well, we have all that stuff in the kitchen. I'm like, oh, like I didn't even know. So it's one of my favorite stories to follow. So I appreciate that.
Always listen to your wife. Always listen to your wife. They're smarter than us.
Yep. She's probably watching right now and nodding and laughing. So
women are smarter than men.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. So I have 5 more quick questions that don't necessarily fit into the story, but I wanted to ask them and didn't know where they would fit. So sort of a rapid fire 5 questions. The arc of your career was such that you only really snapped footballs to 3 guys. Kyle Orton, Drew Brees, and Phillip Rivers.
That's right.
That's pretty random. Like most guys probably snap to more guys, and I don't know that you could find 3 more different guys. Am I correct there?
You're so correct. they are all so different. Yeah, Kyle was a blast. Drew has laser focus.
Yep.
And almost more intense with his personal focus than anybody that I've ever been around.
Yep.
He's incredibly diligent. And he's almost like a horse with blinders on. Like, and he's a great leader in front of a room when it's necessary, but that's not what he loves to do. He's a lead by example type guy.
Yep.
And Phillip Rivers he's one of my best friends. I snapped to him for 9 years. We countless amounts of hours of meetings. We can finish one another's sentence. Still to this day, he is the most pure human being that I've ever been around. Like that's pure of thought, pure of action, pure of passion. He is, and a lot of people, it's misconstrued in the media and he's portrayed a certain way. He is the greatest dude. That's and awesome. Everybody that's ever played for him would love, if nothing else, to sign up for one more battle with Phillip Rivers because it is so fun.
That's cool. There's the notorious stories of him. He doesn't cuss, but he's got his own words that he says.
Yes. You know what's funny is I just watched Peyton's Places on ESPN Plus, and he was with Brett Favre.
Yep.
And I was watching Brett, and I wasn't a huge pro football fan before I played pro football, and so going back and seeing some archives of the way Brett played, it really resonated with me because Brett was Phillip's favorite guy.
Oh, wow.
And Phillip looks and acts a lot like Brett on the field.
That's pretty funny.
Brett would have no problem grabbing a D lineman's face mask and barking in him a little bit. And you could see it with Phillip too.
That's awesome.
Same kind of guy.
So life with 2 boys. I have 4 children of my own, and my wife and I try to eat healthy. You have 2 young boys. How do you get them involved in sort of your healthy eating lifestyle? Because my kids just want like mac and cheese and potato chips.
Yeah, it's just lead by example type thing. And they really understand. It's hilarious. My wife and I talk about this all the time, is they're so in tune with what we're doing. They understand the difference between which macronutrient provides what to the body. What does fat do? What do carbs do? What does protein do? They understand, and they're listening already to themselves. Like, we let them have whatever they want. So if they choose to have Cinnamon Toast Crunch before school, by all means. But it's hilarious because they'll have Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And my oldest son did this 2 years ago. And when we picked him up after school, he's like, never again will I have a sugary cereal before school because my energy fell within an hour of being there. He understood. And so he kind of just understands that. And we talk to him, and part of it is like talking them through what everything does in their body and how it works and why certain foods are important, but then also letting them have the access to, hey, Mom, can I get some ice cream? Yeah, you can have some ice cream. And it's really cool to watch them. They'll go to the fridge, they'll grab a little bit of Jerry's, and they'll take 2 spoonfuls, and then they'll go put it back.
Yeah.
And being able to self-modulate like that, it's really cool. But we eat really incredibly healthy, my wife and I, and we sprinkle that in. And before it was a lot of sprinkling, but now it's just, now they kind of just adopt it. They understand it, and they understand why it's important for them.
So vulnerability time, even though I know that you can do that during your whole NFL career, the one guy that when he came up to the defensive line, you're like, oh my God, this guy again. Like, so tired of having to block this guy.
Oh God, Richard Seymour.
I was gonna say him or the huge guy from the Steelers that was just
Casey Hampton.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
I thought
Casey was really hard to block, but he never put like that kind of fear in me. A guy that did a little bit, Albert Hainsworth.
Oh, really?
Okay. He was a monster.
Yeah.
And he just at certain games he had just such bad intentions. And if he wanted, I mean, I felt like he could have knocked my head to Cleveland.
Yeah.
Like he was such a monster. But Richard Seymour is
very cool.
Incredibly smart, incredibly physically gifted, and incredibly mean on the field.
Awesome.
That's the kind of person you want on your team. You don't
want to face him. Yeah, you were throwing up a lot before that game.
Oh my goodness. And I talked so much trash about him after we lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, specifically about him.
Yeah.
And then he got traded to the Raiders, and we played the Raiders twice a year. I was like,
oh no,
this guy twice a year.
That's pretty funny.
Oh, that's good.
So, 2 questions really fast. You in your podcast with your wife, she asked you 3 tips for the people listening for, sort of to help them on their health journey. Can you go over those briefly?
Yeah. So prioritize your sleep. I think if you want to become healthier, the first thing you need to do is figure out how to rest, because sleep is the area where our brains really realign and our bodies restore. And if you can get your hormones in check in the bedroom and you can put yourself in a good place to rest, to restore, to recover, then you really set yourself up for a great day ahead. The next one would be to stay physically active. And that's super simple, but it's like walk more. Just simply walk more, 10 to 12,000 steps a day. Stay active. It doesn't require, like, weightlifting's my jam. Swimming may be your jam.
Yep.
Everybody's got their own thing. Some people like cardio. Some people like powerlifting. So, okay, whatever that is, great.
Do
it and then walk.
Yeah.
One doesn't replace walking. We are built to walk. Like if your back's sore, walk.
Yeah.
If your neck's sore, walk. It's super important to be able to do that. And then figure out what works for you from a dietary standpoint. How can you keep your calories in balance? Calories in, calories out. After everything that I've done over the years, every diet, I've vegan, paleo. I haven't done carnivore because I think that's a little reckless.
Yep.
Keto. I mean, everything you could imagine, I've done it. I've tried it for at least a couple of months and seen how it worked with my body. Every single diet will work if you stay in a caloric balance.
Got it.
Or if you're trying to lose weight, you eat less calories than you burn. If you're trying to gain weight, you eat more calories than you burn. It's very, very simple. And there's really no deviations from that. People that try to tell you that I'm only eating a certain amount of calories and I'm not losing weight are lying.
Yeah.
So get your calories in check, sleep, walk, and figure out a diet that works in your lifestyle. There's no perfect diet. And eat your greens, eat your fruit, eat your veggies.
Love it. Love it.
And people who try to tell you don't eat fruit, they're crazy. They are crazy. And carbs, by the way, you can lose weight and have carbohydrates. So if you're out there listening to this too, and you want to lose weight, and you're like, oh, I have to go keto. No, you don't.
Yep.
You can have your carbs.
Healthy carbs.
There's plenty of them. Yeah.
Yep.
Stay under your caloric limits.
There you go. Well, last question. I really appreciate this. What's next for you, man?
Working on the podcast and seeing if we can keep these gyms growing.
All right.
Yeah, and then dadding. Just dad. And I tell you, my boys are at an age now, 6 and 8 years old. It is so fun for me. Like this is the age where, and literally one of them said it the other day. They're like, I want to be just like you when I grow up.
Oh man.
Oh.
That's awesome.
It was unbelievable when I heard that. And it's like all they want to do is play football and lift weights and run and be active and sit on my lap and watch sports. And it's like, oh, this is magic.
Very cool.
This is so magic. So a lot of dadding.
I really appreciate this. This has been great. I love this story, and I still heard things that I didn't know, and that's really what I wanted. But keep doing the podcast. I'm going to share it on my networks, and I really appreciate you doing this.
Hey, thank you so much, Kevin.
Not a
Appreciate you
problem.
having me.
All right. Thanks, brother.
Hey, good luck.
See ya.